I will call to order the City of Portage Planning Commission for Monday, November 7th. If you would stand and say the pledge. Mr. Monroe, could you call roll?
Tom Sherry. Gina Geis-Hurst.
Here.
Sam LaVoy. Charles Meyer. Hortensia Moreno.
Here.
Charles Thompson.
Here.
Melissa Weidenbach.
Here.
Kevin Witherspoon. Denise Little.
Here. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes, and if there are no corrections or additions, may I have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any reports from staff or committees?
And none at this time.
Could you call our first public hearing?
First public hearing is Z0522 Security Door Inc., care of Todd Leith and Katie Cup of Hepner, Wagner, and Evans, 103 East Lincoln Way, Valparaiso, Indiana, requesting a change of zoning from R2, low-density residential, to LI, light industrial, for 19.15 acres plus or minus on the east side of Samuelson Road, south of Interstate 8090, between Silver Cloud and County Road 875 North.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Todd Leith, and I'm here on behalf of the petitioners in this matter, Security Door. As was indicated, this is a request to amend your zoning map, and I've got a brief series of slides to help me present to you our request. This is a zone map amendment, so we're asking to change the zoning for a parcel that's approximately 19 acres in size, and is currently zoned R2 low-density residential under your existing zoning map. This is an aerial photograph highlighting the area in question. Again, on the east side of Samuelson, the western boundary of our property is Samuelson Road, and the toll road forms the kind of the arc there in the north of the property in question. So we're asking to be rezoned to the light industrial zoning classification under your zoning ordinance. Security Door has an existing location immediately north. Interestingly enough, that existing location is an island unto itself and not in the city. It's in county jurisdiction. So the red little wedge is their existing location. Security Door is a company that has not been around terribly long and has grown well. They provide for security, overhead doors, fences, access control for businesses generally. They don't do a lot or any commercial. It's all businesses and industry, servicing the steel mills and the suppliers and contractors in and around the area that supply heavy industry in the area. So they're currently located at that property, that little red sliver there, and under the county jurisdiction, that is zoned light industrial. And so the subject property is just immediately south of that in yellow on this slide, and you can see they're contiguous there. And it just so happens that our requested zoning that we're seeking, the light industrial, and the light industrial and the county zoning map mesh very, very well. The uses that are allowed in one and the other are very similar. And of course, the purpose of our request is so that we can either expand and or relocate just immediately south onto the yellow parcel, the 19 acres. Zoning in and around us, we are currently R2, and you can see there's R2 completely surrounding this property. That's institutional zoning on the other side of the toll road. So the subject parcel, the purpose of our rezoning is to match what we have now with what your zoning ordinance would allow us to do. And as I indicated, the two definitions of light industrial, the county and the city's zoning ordinance, are very similar and allow for that. So we can relocate the existing building with those same types of uses, the Security Doors business, to that property. So state law says that we have to look at certain things, current conditions, most desirable use, conservation of property values, and responsible growth and development are the last of those 5 items. The first one is the comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive plan doesn't anticipate this zoning classification. But then again, I don't believe that it anticipated that we would have light industrial right next to us. So this is the land use map that's in that 2009 comprehensive plan. And if we zero in, you can see that it does show that this be a R2 low-density residential area. And it's that way pervasively throughout the whole area in surrounding this. But again, you can see that it's really not anticipating that there would be industrial zoning where my client currently exists. So we think the fact that we are already there with a light industrial use. Samuelson is not a local road. It's a more heavily traveled than a local road. A collector arterial road is important. We also have determined that there is a FEMA flood hazard area in close proximity. You can see it actually touches our property. So we think that that's important as well in our request to seek zoning change. We think that there's nothing in our request that is contrary to the purposes and intent of your zoning classification. I know that your staff has reviewed our request. He has a series of conditions. I've reviewed those conditions with my client. We find those conditions to be acceptable, and we can move forward in accepting those in whatever manner your staff, your attorney request us to accommodate and incorporate those conditions. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have or those that come from the public. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now open the public hearing. Is there anybody here to speak for the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak for the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak for the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner?
Good evening, Reverend Michael Cooper, 5455 Clem Road here in Portage. I'm here before the Plan Commission today to speak against this zoning change. The petitioner has talked about the small little sliver of industrial zones that is to the north of the property. I would like to begin a little bit further south along 875 North. There is 118 acres of undeveloped county light industrial zones under the county standards as well. That ramps to the former Robin Wood Golf Course property, which my concern is going to be that if you begin to create this industrial zone to the north of this R2, the only logical further development to the south would be to continue to develop those properties as light industrials further south toward 875 North. That property around 875 North, kind of that's zoned light industrial in the county, stretches out to the former Robin Wood Golf Course property, which, you know, given the the transition that area is in, and given the proper investment, could become one of the cornerstones of residential developments along Robbins Road to the Portage city limits, south of this R2 area where is noted on the map. Immediately to the north of these light industrial county properties is the 56 acres that is the Elite Sports Complex, which, besides creating a great place for our youth soccer leagues, creates an important buffer zone between the potential but still undeveloped industrial zones to the south and the residential areas, both developed and undeveloped, to the north. Granting a zoning change to light industrial north of this buffer zone completely removes the benefit of this currently existing green space, and this is to keep industrial uses separate from residential uses. This rezone will significantly alter the developability of two large future residential areas in Portage, namely the extension of Squirrel Creek to the west and to the north, as well as Shadow Woods subdivision to the south, as both of these future developments will now be adjacent to a light industrial zone. Council argues that due to the flood hazards, there are limits to the development of these properties, but I will leave that to the respective property owners to prove him wrong. I will argue that whatever value these two developers of these future residential areas in particular, and in the city of Portage in general, could get in the future out of these subdivision extensions will be significantly limited by the rezoning to light industrial next to it, more limiting than any floodplain mitigation. Creating a small disconnected light industrial area is not a good plan for Portage and inconsistent with any type of comprehensive process. As other areas in this vicinity, the side of Portage, the county, particularly around State Road 149, continues to grow as a light industrial corridor. I don't see really any of the currently undeveloped light industrial areas to the south of Elite Sports Complex ever being used as light industrial before being absorbed into the city, most likely as residential that reach out to the future redevelopment around Robinhurst Golf Course. If this parcel being requested tonight is rezoned light industrial, then this body is de facto and outside the comprehensive plan process recommending the establishment of the newest light industrial area in the city of Portage. If this rezone passes city council, I am sure that in the near future, this commission will hear another request to rezone the Elite Sports property to light industrial. And the argument that Attorney Leach will be making is that there is adjacent light industrial to the north and to the south, so it makes sense just to make the entire area light industrial. And then I would have to stand here and say to you that Attorney Leach is correct. While I understand the isolation of the existing security door facility north of the Elite Sports Complex, this area is not suitable for their expansion. As the petitioner notes, there is, existing light industrial area in the county. And since expansion of this expansion north of the Elite Sports property will encroach on further development of two large existing residential neighborhoods and undermine the value of the current green space buffer zone, I am asking the Plan Commission to send an unfavorable recommendation to our City Council. Thank you.
Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Leith, would you like to respond to any of the comments?
I would, thank you. I guess I don't share such a clear crystal ball as the gentleman who spoke with regard to what might be in the future. I can tell you that every case that you receive needs to stand on its own merits. I think this one is meritorious in seeking to change the zoning from what your comprehensive plan and your current zoning map currently provide for the reasons I've stated. If there is a property that changes down the road, I certainly don't know what that would be. Perhaps the speaker knows something about the property to the south. I suspect that it is supposition as to who may or may not, in proximity to this or any other property, petition to have a zoning change. But again, they're going to have the same criteria. They're going to have to meet those five standards that the state sets out for you to look at. And the domino effect doesn't apply the further you go. at some point in time, the analysis fails because you get too far from the toll road. You get too far from the existing development to say that it's in close proximity to other development. This is immediately next door. It touches. Both the yellow and the red properties in this petition, on this slide, are owned by the same company. And we're just simply trying to put together a parcel that they can expand their business. A very successful business, one that is Portage homegrown. And we'd really like to continue that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions from the commission?
So how big of a facility are they planning to put on that 19 acres?
That's something that we don't know. Again, when they started in their garage, and then they built this project. Now they have 80 employees, so they need a bigger facility. I don't know. My client is not here. I'm not sure why he's not here, but I do know that he does not have any building plans, so I can't tell you that it's going to be 10 or 20,000 square feet, or what size building that would be. What we do have is a lot of room to place that in a specific area. One of the concerns, one of the conditions that your staff has told us is that they want our entrance to this site to match anticipated development on the west side of Samuelson. And that's one of the conditions, and we're willing to do that. One of the other conditions that is being suggested is that we're not insensitive to the fact that this property on the east side, where we don't think there'll be any development, will have a robust buffer yard because of the development of that future subdivision that's already in existence, future phases. So we'll provide for that. The other thing that I think is important is that light industrial, by your definition, does not allow for outdoor storage. So this is a fully enclosed business. Will there be parking? Of course. Does Security Door have a fleet of trucks? They do. But that's parking. That's not piling materials and raw materials and equipment outdoors, other than rolling stock that is parking, in my opinion, and your code. So I believe that light industry fits next to residential, provided that it's buffered. And that's what your staff has already recommended, is to provide for a robust buffer so that we have that screening, and that we don't have any light. We just had a time change, so if the crew is coming back to the property at this time of the year, they'll be pulling into the parking lot. And if that parking lot were to be close to the property line, and it's not, by the way, because, again, one of the conditions is it's only a single site development, so we're not going to have 30 businesses in the 19 acres. But if we were to be able to have parking way in the back over by the property line on the east, that with that robust buffer, it would block headlights from returning vehicles at this time of the day, this time of the year. So I think your staff has recognized exactly the challenges that this petition's brought with regard to the fact that there's existing development, residential development, and there's future residential development in the area.
Can I ask, the process that they're doing now, will that process remain the same?
It will.
Or will they're making all their doors where they're at right now, I guess?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
You have on here about the buffer for along the east side. What about the south side, if you can explain?
So I don't believe that we need a buffer there, but we're certainly willing to consider that. it's not anticipated that that's a residential development, though it's zoned that way. But my understanding is the property owner is not going to develop residentially to the south of us. I don't recall, Mr. Monroe, was your anticipated condition that we have a robust buffer on the south? It just says along the east, I believe.
The suggestion of the staff is to provide a written comment to provide buffering along the south property line as well.
And that's acceptable.
Thank you.
Just a comment with the floodplain being there. I was involved in Squirrel Creek. There was no way that that development could continue. It was just cost prohibitive with how that floodplain goes.
There was a suggestion at the Development Review Committee that the floodplain maps may be changing again. As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, FEMA's website does show it, just as I did. So I did double check. There have been no changes.
Any other questions? Comments?
Would you be in favor of setting a timetable for implementation of that buffer yard and establishment of trees?
I would suggest that that be at the same time that a building, I mean, we'll establish it that it will be created at the time that building happens.
Is there a timetable for when the building will happen?
I believe it's as soon as possible, but I don't want to commit to do it now and we wait until the spring to pull permits.
So you know that they're going to start as soon as possible, but you didn't know how big of a building or what they were planning on putting on there?
I do not know. I'm sure that my client has a better idea as to the size of the building. I just don't know what that is.
Is there any plans for like lighted signs along the toll road or?
There'll be signage, but I don't know. I was looking to see if there's existing signage there. I believe there's existing signage. I don't know whether it's lighted or not.
It's not.
I did not believe it was, but.
On the list of suggested conditions where it says a list of light industrial uses that would be allowed, what would be the light industrial uses allowed?
So just reading your ordinance, institutional uses, government facilities, office service, office showroom, office warehouse, office design and planning, commercial uses such as truck sales and service, recreational vehicle sales, dry cleaning, food and beverage production, general industrial production, light industrial assembly and distribution, light industrial processing and distribution, truck sales and service center, truck freight terminal, warehouse and distribution facility, and wholesale facility are the permitted uses.
Would that currently, the proposed use be light industrial assembly and distribution?
It would. That's my interpretation, at least.
And our motion could tighten those uses up to the one business. Would you be okay with that?
No, I would not, because I believe it's bad planning to say that only one use is allowed. Under a use variance, if we were at the Board of Zoning Appeals, the underlying zoning would still be in place. But if you're asking my client to say that they'll only do one thing, that makes the property very unmarketable should he ever choose to close his business or move his business to a different location.
So is it my understanding, Counselor, that you're not willing to commit to a tighter list than the permitted uses?
I didn't say that. I'm willing to cross off some of the
Okay.
more objectionable uses, but I want to have a broad range of uses, just like your zoning ordinance would have. But, for example, the one that kind of strikes me is truck freight terminal.
Yeah.
If we wanted to cross that one off the list, I don't have a problem with that.
And
Recognizing there's no access to the toll road, so that wouldn't be very viable there, but
so staff's recommendation in that fourth bullet point is to spend the time to walk through that list. Because as Counselor stated, there are some uses that staff felt you might find as not appropriate uses on that property. And as I said earlier in the staff report, if it weren't but for the fact that this is security door, and this was a standalone LI change of zoning request, I don't think we would be thinking of it the same way. But because of who it is, their past performance, it's a Portage business looking to expand, everything that was going on around the property, we felt that if it was the pleasure of the commission to move forward with a recommendation to advance this petition, that some of these written commitments really needed to be spelled out. During the Development Review Committee where Attorney Leith presented and one of the owners from SDI was present, we walked through a number of these things, and it was made very clear to the members of the Development Review Committee that this is what their plans were, these what were the plans for the property. And Hortensia, the client, or Todd's client, didn't know exactly the size of building. That was something that they were working on with, we were advised that this is something they were working on with their design engineer. So in our staff recommendation, if it is the pleasure of the commission to move forward with a recommendation, a favorable recommendation, we would ask you to take the time this evening to review that list of permitted uses, so to better define the future. Is we heard during public comment, there are some uses out here that we may not find as acceptable land uses. And so so I wanted to be clear in the staff report that we are asking the Plan Commission to consider narrowing the list of permitted uses in the zoning district.
And absolutely, because what they have now is very clean. You never really see people around there. You don't see a lot of traffic around there. But with everything that's listed under the possibilities,
Yeah, that's a good question.
So give us a couple minutes.
oh, happy to do so, sure.
Hey, guys, we can't do that. Okay. You gotta talk out loud.
We're just reading. We're reading the list.
Okay, as long as we're reading and not conferring.
We're not talking, we're reading. Could you explain general industrial production?
By definition, General industrial production is industrial production involving manufacturing, fabrication, and related processes. Well, it's hard being me sometimes, isn't it?
Could you give an example of one that is in shortage now?
Oh, man,
A business that would fall under that?
in an LI zoning district, huh? LI, where are we at in the city? Give me a second, I'm conferring over here, all right. Like, PSC machining, is it LI on the north side of 20, or is that BP? I think that's BP on the north side. Where do we have LI? Steel Technologies, or is that BP? What's that map say? That one right here, the one in the book.
If I could be so bold as to suggest a few that should come off.
Well, that would be a great start. We'd appreciate it.
Please.
So I believe there are three uses that stand out to me that are different than the rest. And one of them is actually on the list twice. The truck sales and service is on there twice. One, I guess it says truck sales and service, and the other one says truck sales and service center. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. I think that is different. Truck freight terminal kind of falls in that same category. And recreational vehicle sales facility. Those four seem to be different than all the others. And one of the reasons is I think that there's just a lot of sales and retail activity, usually of bigger vehicles and so forth. Those seem to be the ones that I would think would be most objectionable in a light industrial use, as I was envisioning, next to a residential area. The other ones are processes that frankly fit in a building very nicely, and you have employees who come and you have employees that go at the end of the day. There may be service vehicles, just like security door, that has some activity through the day. But it's not like a retail, it's not a truck freight terminal where you have trucks coming and going. It's not a sales and service center where you have trucks being dropped off, trucks being picked up, and so forth. I think those three or four are the ones that kind of stand out to me. The other ones all seem to fit in my estimation, or in my view of what a light industrial development would be. Recognizing, again, no outdoor storage is allowed.
Another business, I think.
What about the dry service commercial?
It's not service, I think, right here.
The dry cleaning?
That one also is, if you're talking about,
We want to get the zoning.
doesn't look like the others, the dry cleaning service commercial, I think should,
So it's not retail. So this is where the garments would be collected, I'm envisioning, from all over on a route driver, and then brought back to this facility and cleaned inside. You don't have retail customers coming, and then they're put back on a van or a vehicle, a truck, and delivered the next day back out to customers. So I think that fits more in the line of what I think fits. Am I gonna die on that hill? No. It's not that big of a deal, but I think it fits better with what I envision versus the truck freight terminal.
That should be LI. Whoops. There's a lot going on there.
You don't know how tall. Will it be just one-story building?
I suspect it will, but I don't know for sure.
is the current building a one-story building?
It is.
It looks big.
I mean, it's tall because he puts, his vehicles are in there and they're, you know, fabricating and so forth, so it's not 30 feet tall, it's probably a little taller.
Thanks for your time. The area off of 249 Shepherd Drive, that's actually one of the few areas in the city we have zoned light industrial. I think as time has gone on, you know, we have a lot of heavy industrial, Port of Indiana, north of 12, a lot of BP. Ameriplex had a commercial and LI zoning before it became Ameriplex at the port. A lot of the stuff on the north side of 20 ends up being business park. So really it's more about, I think, recognizing the uses, the heights, and the development standards that are in that zoning district. But I think uses is a big start to it. You know, you know, we had a hearing a little while ago about a questionable land use, and sometimes making that determination as to what is, how does it fit into some of these definitions can be very tricky for staff, and ultimately led to us coming to the BZA some time ago on a similar sort of question. So it is about, I think, proximity. You know, council, you know, is advertised this as light industrial. You know, okay, that he was trying to square up with the county. Okay, well, that's not the city, it's the county. And that's why I think in our staff recommendation, based on what we heard during the review committee meeting, that what the staff is asking as considerations is because of who it is, and because of their existing facility, and so on and so forth. It's a known sort of commodity. And that's why, and why staff thought it was important to get very specific in the list of light industrial uses, is because that was the hand dealt. The petitioner sought this change of zoning. It didn't come with my advice. They came seeking this change of zoning to this district. Now I'm asking if the Plan Commission wants to consider moving forward with this use. I'm asking you to get very specific, because again, if it weren't SDI, we probably wouldn't be talking about this. So I'm of the belief that we should get very specific as to which uses are going to be permitted here, because there is the cautionary tale that they may not be here forever. Okay, so getting very specific, I think, is very important with what's going on here, because some of these uses, while the sales and those sort of things may go away, SDI may go away, and it could be one of these other uses listed as permitted uses that you may not be comfortable with going forward. Some of these will be more impactful to the neighborhood than what is being proposed by SDI.
And that's why we're going through the exercise of
This.
cherry picking off the ones that you feel are not in keeping with the neighborhood.
So as an example, you asked the question, what's your process? Attorney Leith responded that our process is we gather material, we build a door, we assemble it, we distribute it. That is an entirely different process than light industrial processing, right? So that is a different thing. In that case, it could be processing the material that goes into the manufacturing of a good. That is different than what SDI is proposing, right? And we had that question asked of us at the BZA a couple months back, right? And we know what can happen in those situations, right? So I think we need to be very clear and limited in our scope here. And the petitioner down the road, the world changes, the crystal ball becomes crystal clear, is that the petitioner can always come back and seek something. What that is, that's for the counselors to help us figure out as a citizen board. But as it stands right now, I'm just suggesting that if the Plan Commission wants to move forward specifically with this petition, get narrow, focus. And what we're doing here is offering an opportunity for a Portage business to continue to grow.
Because as they sit right now, I think it would be okay, but when I look at what's on Route 249,
It's different.
it's a totally different animal.
Right. And that's why it's important to go through permitted and special uses as well, because if you look at special exception uses, a commercial use is animal boarding and the outdoor use of animal boarding. Okay, that isn't, we're here talking about SDI, very specifically narrow permitted use that we're trying to get to, right? So and as attorney said, that's why we're here, is to narrow down this list, so that, we can make the, make whatever decision you'd like to make. But, staff suggestion is narrow it down if it's your pleasure. I think too many open questions will be problematic going down the road. Well, it would be the petitioner. But if you narrow down the uses, it's gonna be very specific, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I would hope we don't have to get it's a good question, though. That's why we gotta narrow the use down, yeah. So he's saying no, that's why we gotta narrow the use down, because think about that, you couldn't convey the real estate, because it would be only for you. So then,
How would you feel if
then the other, and then all of a sudden,
we tabled this until we could really look at all the definitions in here so that we could narrow it down? I would like to do it correctly and get it done right, but protect the future too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No.
May I have a motion?
Are we continuing to do a date certain?
yes, our meeting is December, when's the next meeting?
Is that what you guys' intent is? Then we continue to the next meeting.
Continue, yeah.
I ask that we continue. I'll make a motion for continuance. December 5th?
We have a motion. May I have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Monroe, could you call roll?
Gina Geis-Hurst,
Yes.
Hortensia Moreno,
Yes.
Charles Thompson,
Yes.
Melissa Weidenbach,
Yes.
Denise Little.
Yes.
Thank you.
Could you call our next order of new business?
Yes, this is Z0622 Olthoff Homes, care of Todd Leith and Katie Cup of Hepner, Wagner, and Evans, 103 East Lincoln Way, Valparaiso, Indiana, requesting a change of zoning from R2, low-density residential, to M1, multifamily residential, and M2, multifamily residential, for 32.73 acres plus or minus south of Lute Road between East Bend and Roswell Drive.
Good evening.
My name hasn't changed. I'm here on behalf of Altoff Homes, the petitioner in this matter as well. As with the previous one, this is a request to change your zoning map, a zone map amendment. A zone map amendment, and the property is nearly 33 acres. It's on the south side of Lute Road. It's currently zoned R2, low-density residential. That was a fairly recent occurrence, by the way, and we'll talk about that. The property is very irregularly shaped, and there it sits in an aerial view. And if I could. So this is the 33 acres. We have, for orientation, Highway 6 is down here. This is Menards, sits on the southern property. We have the Breckenridge Apartments immediately to our west. There's 2 homes in this little notch. There's a home in this little area as well. Church, and of course, you can see all the rooftops, the single-family homes surrounding to the north of Lute Road and east of the property a little bit as well. We're seeking to change the zoning map to allow for 2 different zoning districts within that area. We have the concept plan, which I'll show in a moment, that has paired cottage homes. There's 15 lots. Each is a duplex, if you will, a 2-family home. So there's 30 homes there. And then we have a series of townhome buildings throughout the remainder of that property. And that numbers 136 homes for a total of 166 homes on the 33 approximately acres. This is the concept plan, as I indicated. So you can see the layout with Lute Road being on the north. Menards is on the south here. Those 30 homes or 15 lots of M1 are in this area, strategically placed to provide for a buffer between the single family over in this area and the more densely populated townhome development throughout the rest. Augusta Boulevard comes and terminates at the southern portion of our property. Your thoroughfare plan anticipates and requires, frankly, that Augusta be brought through and connect so that it matches Augusta on the north side of Lute Road, and you can see that our concept plan does that. In our petition, we have a very specific 8.4 acres, which is this area here. And so we have a legal description of the M1 district. It matches this concept plan. This 8 acres here forms those 15 lots. The other 24 acres of the overall 33 is the townhome area, if you will, what's left, carving out that buffering for the duplex or the cottage homes. Again, as I said in the earlier petition, state statute requires us to look at responsible development, conservation of property values, desirable uses, current conditions, and that all-important comprehensive plan. We believe that this request addresses each of those requirements. A desirable use for this property. This property has never been developed. It's fallow. It's been undeveloped since the beginning of time. And as you well know, the city has considered this for development multiple times since 2018, most recently, when there was a failed attempt to develop some single-family build-to-rent type housing. My client at the time, not so long ago, last year, returned it to the current zoning to R2. We did that for one reason and one reason only, sales. They wanted to market the property. And so we did that just recently. Now my client then was the Lute family, and it has done just that. We've found a buyer. It's Altoff Homes, my current client, your petitioner tonight. and we want to change the zoning classification to this mixed residential development that we've shown in that concept plan, the cottage homes and the townhomes. Your comprehensive plan is that last district, and as before, the future land use map within that shows that this is anticipated for office uses. I suggest that that may be problematic, given the size of 33 acres, given the size of where it's at on Lute Road, and frankly, the proximity to the residential. Other significant factors, we have a significant right-of-way running through this property, Augusta Boulevard. That may or may not impact development of an office-type development. Our concept plan provides for 60-foot buffering along the east property lines where we meet the other uses to the east. We're most concerned with Georgian Park subdivision, and that's why we've got 60 feet. 60 feet is a very large buffer yard. That's a robust buffer yard. Typically, buffer yards are 20 or 30 feet wide. This is twice as large as those larger, more common developments. 60 feet wide is pretty significant. And then lastly, as I indicated, the Lute family recently rezoned this property back to R2, not for any anticipated development, just simply to place it into a zoning classification that they felt was marketable to someone, some developer that would then take the property and either develop as the R2 or, in this case, Altoff using what we think is the tools available to them to provide for those buffer yards, but also to provide for a mixed-use residential that fits within the parameters of this 33 acres. So let's just digest this slide a little bit. There are 5 different neighboring zoning districts. The yellow parcel is our 33 acres. But look at the different zoning districts neighboring this 33 acres. I can't envision another property anywhere in Portage, and I can't envision one anywhere in my practice that has so many different zoning classifications surrounding it. We have the C2 to the south, Menards. The schools are institutional here. We have the residential development around us, the church. We have a sliver of R2 that comes in, which is owned by the church. We have Breckenridge Apartments, which is M2. We have office over in this area. So if one were to put on their planning hat and try and figure out what's the best use for the yellow 33 acres, I think you're hard-pressed to come up with a good fit that matches all of those different zoning classifications. So I suggest that the most overriding uses that impact the development of this property are the Menards to the south and the residential to the north, the R2. The OC over here can fit and be very complementary to virtually anything, but certainly to a definition or a use here of mixed residential or townhomes and the cottage homes on the east. So how do you find a use in a short period of distance, this property, 33 acres, that fits both of those? I think a mixed residential development, the M1 and the M2 as we're proposing, is that transition between the R2 on the north and the C2 on the south. Those are the overriding uses. On R2, which is what we have here currently, doesn't fit, in my opinion, to the Menards to the south. Menards doesn't have that robust buffer. They don't have that 60-foot that we're providing to the east. So we've really got a property that is an infill project, if there ever was one, with so many moving parts that we have to be very creative. But quite frankly, I'm not sure that settling on a mixed residential development is much of a mental gymnastics to try and come up with something as it would be if we were trying to come up with something that fit in the R2 or was an office development. The other thing that we have, as you go around the perimeter of this property, is 6 different types of neighboring uses. We have the Menards heavy retail, we have the apartments on the northwest, we have vacant office to the left on the west, we have a church, we have single family, we have all these different types of uses in all of these different zoning classifications. This is a hard property to find that use. And I think that the higher density residential is more conducive to the south and the C2 classification to provide for that transition to the R2 to the north. I know that there are some concerns of staff with regard to this petition, but we've done, I think, a credible job in coming up with a concept plan. We've worked with staff on the development of that concept plan. We've reduced the density down from what was originally proposed, and we're certainly willing to continue to work with the city and the staff, but we think that we've got a concept that fits very well in the existing very structured limitations of your existing development of that 33 acres. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have or those that come from the public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will open the public hearing. Is there anybody here to speak for the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak for the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak for the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner? There should be a form for you to write your name and your address.
Hello. I'm actually a Loot. My property is actually the little green square there by the subject property, and I am totally against this change to put the multifamily patio homes and the townhomes. I don't think we can support that kind of traffic and the amount of people that will be living there. And with the subdivision going in at the end of Loot and on Airport, it's just, I don't think it's feasible to have a multifamily projects put in there. I just don't see that it's feasible. Thank you.
Can we get the
Thank you.
comment, the name?
Lisa Loot.
Thank you so much.
Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner? Is there anybody here to speak against the petitioner? If not, I close the public hearing. And would you like to respond, to Mrs. Lute. Ms. Lute?
So, traffic, of course, is important. Augusta Boulevard is a major, maybe not major is the wrong word, but a significant right-of-way, as I suggested. Not a local road. Your thoroughfare plan anticipates and requires that it be continued through. So that will provide for, we believe, good traffic flow. It will allow for traffic to go both south to Highway 6 as well as north to Lute Road. Any development of this property, whether it's office, whether it's R2, or whether it's our request, is going to have that same requirement. And I would suggest to you that all of those developments are going to have a traffic impact on the neighborhood.
Thank you. Open to questions from the commission.
So what happened to putting in the residential homes? I mean, I believe we saw plans for that.
So in 2018, there was some plans that were ultimately not approved by the city for homes there. The city denied that request. When my client, one of the Lute family members who owns the property in question, the 33 acres, when that property came back to them under their control without contract, they felt as though the R2 was the best placeholder zoning in order to market it for sale. And so that's when the city changed the zoning classification very recently, I believe last year, to the R2 classification. The Lutes are not developers, so it was simply a placeholder in order to market the property for sale. If the buyer wanted to use that R2, we felt that that was the one that was in most keeping if you didn't have plans. And so Altoff is now under contract to buy this property, and they don't want to use the R2, which is a single-family development. Because in my estimation and in my clients, this is just, that southern property line is not conducive to residential development, single-family residential development. You typically don't want to put your home next to, Menards, and all of the things that Menards has. And they don't have a buffer yard. Menards does not have a buffer yard in that area. They have a fence, but that's about it.
How many townhomes are in each unit?
So it varies. Ed, help me out. I want to say it's 4 to 6 or 3 to 6. Ed Rechtenwall from Olthoff Homes.
Can you put that map back up with the display of it?
The rendering.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ed Rechtenwall, Olthoff Homes, 8051 Wicker Avenue, St. John, Indiana. The buildings vary in size. I believe this current plan shows them between 6 and 14 units, but don't hold me to that. I mean, I could count units for you here, but like the buildings along Menards are probably approximately 14 units. But we have ways of making these of various configurations.
Do they have garages?
They do. There's a detached two-car garage in the back. So it's a courtyard-style townhome building, so there's living space, a courtyard for private outdoor space for each resident, and then a garage in the back. So they're alley-loaded product.
And how big is that outdoor living space?
It's 16 feet,
16 feet,
and the unit's approximately 22 feet wide.
so 16 by 22.
Correct.
Is there a reason why, I believe the first map we saw had definitely more of the double lot homes versus all of these townhomes?
The first map you saw tonight?
No, I think you're thinking of a different, that is over by Coles.
Okay, I apologize.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see less density. It's just really difficult.
How is the delineation between M1 and M2 determined?
So we were attempting to buffer the Georgian Park subdivision on the other side of the church. And that's why the paired cottage home lots are in that area. And that was the sole reason why we placed those lots there.
So you're buffering M2 with M2?
It's the, Georgian Park is R2. Yep. The other M2 is over in this area. Breckenridge.
Then what about the other R2s along Loot?
So we've got, in this area, we've got the M1, the duplexes here, and then over on this area, we've got no townhomes that go out to Loot Road, nor access out there. The only access is over here. So we don't think there's any buffering required because we've got that open space on that little leg up there. On this side, you've got the consistent M2 zoning already, and then you've got office down here, and then in this area, it's commercial. So we don't see the need to buffer M1 or a lighter density to those competing zoning districts. Quite frankly, they're more intense than our M2.
Zone went with your R2 approval.
I'm s-
The buffer zone that you put on the west side of the property, because that is for office space, that you were required to put that buffer zone in with your last approval.
When the Lute family received theirs, they received it conditioned on certain conditions, one of which was the buffering. If we rezone it, I believe that those conditions go away. We can put new conditions on it, similar to address those concerns. But again, I'm not sure that we need to buffer in this area the same zoning districts. You know, why do we need to buffer to Breckenridge when they're the exact same zoning district? Down here, it's office. Why does residential have to buffer to office? Office should buffer to residential.
Well, that's why, because we didn't want them to have the expense when we were giving you the zoning change.
To R2.
Correct.
And those are the details that we can work out. I mean, that's, we can work with that. I'm not sure that we can put a 60-foot buffer there, but as I suggested, a 30-foot buffer is, frankly, we may already have that shown there.
Showing 10.
It says 10.
Showing 10, so we can increase the size of that buffer, I assume.
Yeah, we would be willing to do, you know, we've done buffers many different ways. We would vinyl fencing, you know, we could fence, make it a sheer fence type buffer with a smaller landscape buffer as well, or we could have discussions on different sizes. I mean, we'd be willing to buffer against that office commercial if necessary. I think we've kind of proven that fact that we're providing a 60-foot along Georgian Park, and then obviously we're maintaining the 20-foot against the Menards.
And Todd, just for point of clarification, we're looking at a concept plan,
Yes.
and now we're getting into some detail on the concept plan. Is this the plan that they're approving? I know we're splitting hairs at this point, but I mean, we're getting down to buffer yards and things of that nature. The request is to have the rezone and where you want it to be. So traditionally, you walk out of here, if you get a favorable recommendation and the council were to approve it, then you get to do what you want to do in those zoning districts in these areas. So I just want to be clear to everyone involved, the more we dial in on specific areas, I just want their expectations and your expectations to be in line. Because normally, I know how this is somewhat of a catch-22. You come in, you want a rezone to certain things. If you don't show a concept, the first question is what's going where and how many. But if you show a concept, then it becomes as if we're approving this. I know that may not be your interpretation, but to the citizen members, that may be the interpretation that we are somehow adopting, and this is exactly what we're going to see in a magic day in the future. I just want to be clear with them and your presentation how close to this is reality.
So you're correct. You're not approving this plan. But this plan has some detail. For example, the area that I'm asking be rezoned M1 versus the area that I'm asking be zoned M2 is right down that line. So if you approve the request, this area where it's in the beige, those 15 lots, that's M1, and that's by legal description, and we can't put townhomes there. The rest of it is the M2, that's the 24 acres. We can slide those buildings around like chess pieces, unless you tell us that there's a requirement that so many of the homes have to be on the east side versus the west side of Augusta. I don't want to get into the weeds on that. What I think you should do is worry about the concerns that you have rather than how Altoff puts those chess pieces on the piece of paper to make it address those concerns. If you want a 40-foot buffer or a robust buffer on the west side, say that. And we have to accommodate that in the final development. But as I said, where the cottage homes go and where the townhomes go are by legal description, and that's fixed. That's in the legal descriptions that are consistent with the concept plan that you're looking at on the screen.
And to be clear, I don't think talking about buffer yards is incorrect, but just so you know, because the way the zoning proposal is, can you say, up here by First Presbyterian Church, we are going to require a 60-yard buffer? Yes, they're proposing it, they're showing it. However they configure those lots, we would have the 60-foot buffer. If you're coming over and you're looking at it as opposed to the office, which is below the apartments, again, if you think that requires a larger buffer yard to make people more comfortable, I think that's appropriate discussion to have. Whether or not the building exactly is positioned in the position they are now or not, I think the discussion concerning the adjoining zoning districts is appropriate. But again, like the first case, we also have to look what's allowed in these zoning districts to make sure there's nothing in there you don't want.
Should I read those?
That's up to the board.
Okay, so in the M1, Parks and Recreation, residential is dwelling, single family, attached to DU. Dwelling two family, fair housing facility, home occupation, and childcare home. For the M2, Parks and Recreation, dwelling multifamily, 3 to 16, fair housing facility, home occupation, and childcare home.
Is there a reason why there is so much of an increase in the M2 versus the M1 that you were asking for?
Because of all of the non-residential uses that are on the south and west side of the property, I think the M2 fits where we have it.
Any other comments or questions?
I think it's a stretch for the Plan Commission to review a jump from R2, which we just rezoned to a year ago and was backed by the council, to turn around and make that increase in density from what was originally office a year ago.
So would you support changing it to office for an office development? Because the concern of the neighbor was traffic, and I would suggest that an office development would have far more traffic than a residential development.
That would be something we would review. That was in a comprehensive
Hypothetical,
plan.
I understand that. I guess, I struggle back with that slide. It's difficult for me to tell any developer, whether it's Althoff or an office developer, what fits in that infill project, in that 33 acres that's never been developed. When you've got church and multifamily and Menards, office, vacant office zoning, it's such a difficult process. And it's easy to just say, well, R2 is what the family asked for. They asked for it only as a placeholder because office wasn't going to sell. Because developers are typically like the Althoffs of the world, they're residential developers. And you're not going to find the developers out of Dayton Street from Chicago that are doing an office development along 94. Those are hard developers to find. So residential developers are far more prevalent, as you well know.
May,
Again, we're willing to work with the city on conditions and zoning commitments. We've always had that. It's, I recognize it's not the city's requirement to tell us how to develop the property or how to lay out a concept plan, but it's also hard to read your minds as we're doing so. So if we can have that discourse, tonight's been helpful, too dense, buffer yards, those are things that we can try and address.
I understand your layout for the M2 adjacent to Menards and the townhomes. but it's originally R2. I would like to see more home than townhomes. I think it's a little too congested. Even when you spoke about the traffic on Loot Road, that's gonna be a lot of traffic.
Again, I think any development of 33 acres, if it's an office complex, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I suggest that their traffic generation manual, depending upon how many stories they build, could very well be more traffic.
Still a lot less traffic with more of the single or two-family homes versus the
Agreed, agreed. And that's the balance that we're trying. You know, if you came in and told us to develop it as R2, my guess is we would find that unacceptable and we wouldn't buy the property. But somewhere there might be a balance where it works for both Altoff and the neighborhood and the city. That's what we'd like to find.
Is there a way that you can concentrate on the center point, making that more of single, two-family? And I understand your concept of the outskirts of it.
The center
I'm
point,
concerned the
I don't
center.
understand the concept of center point.
She's looking at this map, Todd, that you have up now. I think, verify if I'm saying this wrong, tell me. I think she's in this area. Can this look more like this, considering that she's understands why you're buffering out here with
Yeah.
that layered look?
Yes. Well, we can go back to the drawing board.
We're definitely willing to come back with another concept if that's the position of the board, and we can look at making some adjustments and adding some more M2 to this plan, if that's what we're understanding tonight to be the concern.
And in so doing, that'll reduce the density, which I think was one of the concerns as well. It's not gonna get it to the R2 density. And I don't wanna create the illusion that we're going to get to anything approaching the R2, because that's, you know, single-family lots. And we're not, I don't think this property is conducive to that. Georgian Park, properties to the north of Loot Road, those were developed long before we had the concerns that we have now on that slide that I keep showing you. All those different zoning classifications impacting this 33 acres. It's a difficult site.
I think Gina's also talking about some single family, not all attached.
The two-family, you're okay, yeah, but I'm not concerned here, and here, you know, this whole area,
The center part of it,
yes.
to your comment.
Because yes, that's buffer and that's already attached with the townhomes, and this creates not enough. Would that be, but I'm concerned on the figure.
The more expanse that we make of the of the cottage homes, recognize that, you know, I guess the designers are gonna, that creates more of a challenge to eliminate driveways on Augusta, but I think that's one of the city's concerns, is that we not have driveways or many driveways on Augusta. And so when we start dictating the duplexes, those typically don't have the drive aisles and the roadway systems that take those direct access points off of Augusta. So there may be a little bit of give and take on that. I just kind of throw that out there.
You already have 5 lots that
We do.
connect to Augusta.
But if we change a lot, we're gonna have 15, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't know that that's a problem. I just want the city to recognize, you're asking us to lower the density, but in doing so, we're going to create more driveways. Again, I don't know that that's a problem. I'm just highlighting what I see to be a potential concern. If we do what you ask, we're creating a potential another problem that you would have. The location of the driveways today on the north end are where the speeds are the lowest.
So are we looking at continuing this or postponing it?
Well, before you make that decision, this is really the 5 individuals' opportunity that are sitting here tonight to say what you're thinking as far as what either it would take to make this palatable or not. Because the more room for interpretation or unclarity that the petitioners have, the less of a chance they're gonna bring something back that you feel is palatable. So just to be fair to both sides, kind of what Gina has done, anyone else that has something about the density or the thick buffer yards, now's the opportunity, because it's also the opportunity for staff to have a window into what the Planning Commission members are thinking, so that they are better able to advise.
Need a microphone.
Okay. Did you hear me?
I did.
We're okay. Do you guys hear me? I do. All right, great.
The people on the stream can't hear you.
Roger that.
Okay, I'd like everybody to give their opinions. We're going to go ahead and start. What you think about this?
I think that it's too much in the area. If I was Lisa and I lived here, I would be horrified right now. That's my opinion.
I think there's too many townhomes. This was zoned R2 as to be marketable. It obviously sold or had interest, so why change the zoning now?
I can see the need for some of the townhomes. I do feel that it's really congested, trying to squeeze 14 to 16 row houses all together. I'm also disappointed that, you know, it was changed to residential zoning, and now it's, you know, being changed out again. So I think it's congested.
Attorney Lee,
Yes,
is this property purchased or is this a contingent purchase?
it's a contingent purchase.
Does the board members know what that means?
They don't have to buy it.
Correct.
The density with the townhomes and the amount of townhomes that could be connected, I don't know, have you ever done that many before?
Yes, we have a similar project in Crown Point, Indiana, called Walkerton Park. We-
Didn't that catch on fire once?
It did, that's not, you're not thinking of the correct one.
That was a
did-
different one.
Yes, we did have one area that did have a fire episode, but, you know, it was just one building in there. Not
One
building,
building.
It was one garage, it was a garage unit.
No, I thought it was through, because I knew somebody that lived in there. It was through all the attics.
Then I'm speaking out of, I don't know for sure how many
Okay.
units were affected. I know we did have a fire in there at one point.
Right.
It was many years ago.
Because they had to move out. It wasn't just a garage
Right, it was many years ago.
for months. The density, I understand your buffering, but everything in the center, it's just too dense. And
agree.
it's not what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody that's looking to do apartments for our downtown plan with high density. We just went through that, but here, and I understand what you're saying, but if Augusta was not going through, that line is drawn facing on Route 6, residential faces Loop Road. And I understand everything that you're saying about Menards, but if that Augusta wasn't there, it would be totally different. So I guess it's up to you if you would like to make it that less of dense.
We would like the opportunity to
Okay.
go back to the drawing board.
Perfect.
See what we can come up with and present it to you at your next meeting, and
Okay,
if and it doesn't have to be the end. We think we'll get a lot closer, of course, because
Okay.
we're gonna move in that direction, but you might think that we haven't moved enough, and that's the
right.
process.
No, that's perfect.
I want to say I do like your idea of the open space of the connection to the school. Would definitely be handy for them, whatever ended up being built there.
Okay. Mr. McClure, are we postponing? Always,
If it's to the next meeting, it's a continuance, and if
Okay.
it's to a meeting we're not sure, it's okay.
okay,
If they're gonna change the delineations of M1 and M2, would they have to reapply with a different?
The advertisement might have to be changed depending on how it was written exactly.
So, my take on that is that we're going from this plan, which has M1 and M2. And I suspect greatly that the plan that we bring back is going to have M1 and then M2 as well, but it will have more M1 than the current plan. So usually, communities will allow us to go down in zoning without having to re-notify. But if we wanted to go up in the zoning for the M2,
Paired patio homes aren't permitted uses in M2. See the permitted uses list. It's dwelling,
but
multi.
we would change, Mr. Monroe, we would change the line so that it would be M1.
It depends on how the legal was written, we can get to that.
Okay. I don't believe that we would have to re-notify, but if your staff puts their heads together and tells me we do, we will. Easy enough, but I don't think we do because we're going down in our request and not up in intensity. If we were asking for more townhomes than we petitioned for, than we advertised for, then we would have to re-notify, but we're going to go the other way with less density. Typically, communities don't make me re-notice when we do it that way.
may I have a motion?
Motion to continue?
Are you ready to continue for the next meeting?
You're gonna be ready next meeting?
Yes, I believe we
Yes,
will.
we'll be ready.
Motion to continue?
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Monroe, could you call roll?
Gina Geis-Hurst,
Yes.
Hortensia Moreno,
Yes.
Charles Thompson,
Yes.
Melissa Weidenbach,
Yes.
Denise Little.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you again.
Oh,
This is why all those years ago soccer coach was so good, we just played it high. Hey, here's my connection.
Gotta go.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
AJ, one quick question.
Yeah, we haven't adjourned yet.
How do we want to handle the definitions for the first application?
So, I think we left the first hearing with an understanding that we wanted to narrow down the list of permitted uses in the petition. How you go about that, I think I would ask that the Plan Commission members look at the list of permitted uses, special exception uses, and begin to narrow down that list. If you would like some advice as to what staff believes would be things to consider, we can do that. But, it'd be your pleasure as to how you'd like us to assist.
Well, we definitely would like your assistance because I know to go to the definitions, but definitions do not explain what it can all be. And that's where I think we're really going to need some help.
Okay. So, in our next staff report 2.0, we will offer some specifics to the point that we raised regarding a list of light industrial uses that would be allowed. So in a new staff report, we will add our recommendations as to what that list should include, or we would recommend you consider including.
But AJ, for the list of special exception uses, those always have to be requested, right? So do we have to address those now?
The answer is yes, because a special exception is not a variance. A special exception is if you meet point A and point B,
Right.
you get one more overlook, and if you've met those, you get approved.
Right.
So it's as close to you can get to a permitted use as you can get without being a permitted use.
Right.
If it's a variance request when they come in, then there's a completely different standard that those variance requests are looked at. And it's not, you meet the hurdle, you meet the second hurdle, you get approved. Those hurdles are different.
Yeah, in the add to that, there's a number of special exception uses listed in the LI district that I would not be comfortable recommending to you for your consideration. So we've already did this. I think we're down to 3 permitted uses and 2 special exception uses that we would be offering as a recommendation for your consideration.
Just so everybody understands, if you could look at the accepted uses and the special exceptions, and then just as a learning experience, go to the definitions and look at, you might read the words, but look at what the definition explains that to. So, and if you have any questions, shoot AJ an email so that we can kind of know which way you're headed and come together for next month.
That's great.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.